My name is Terry Faubert, and this is my story called Walking Wild. Ever since I first heard about the Trans-Canada Trail, I was captivated by the concept of one path spanning this huge country. By 2009, the TCT was still a work in progress, but its route was walkable. It ran up the coast of Vancouver Island from Victoria to Nanaimo, crossing to Horseshoe Bay, and continuing ever eastward. It sounded like fun to me. Why not try the island section? I walked the first 9 kilometers in May. The TCT started at mile 0 in Beacon Hill Park and followed a gorgeous route around James Bay and the Inner Harbor, across the Johnson Street Bridge and the Selkirk Trestle, and on up the Galloping Goose Trail. It was a beautiful, sunny Victoria Day weekend, and the trail was full of bikers and hikers, some with baby strollers. When I passed tourist information, I impulsively stopped to ask how to return by bus so I could keep going. At mile 0, I asked a passerby to take my photo. The first small part of my adventure had begun. In July, I drove down to Victoria to continue. The weather was hot, but the paved trail was mostly shaded and beautiful. I left the Galloping Goose Trail and turned onto the Lochside Trail, heading north towards Sydney and passing beside 2 lovely nature preserves, Swan Lake and Bleckensop Lake. Sadly, the TCT left the Lochside Trail at Royal Oak, and I walked beside busy West Saanich Road, loud trucks rumbling by my elbow, puffing out noxious fumes. Then suddenly, I was in the pretty little village of Brentwood Bay, checking out the sweet houses and quiet gardens, chuckling to myself at how outrageous it seemed that I had begun walking by the Tillicum Mall some 5 hours before. When I reached the Brentwood Bay Ferry, I stood transfixed by the beauty of this quiet inlet and the tiny ferry that serviced it. I sat down to wait for the bus back, delighting in the success of covering over 20 kilometers that day. The next day saw me leaving the car by the Mill Bay Ferry and hiking along the far side of Saanich Inlet. The sun sparkled on the calm water, and a seal swam nearer to check me out, then kept pace with me for more than a kilometer as I walked along the shore. I had planned to walk only 10 kilometers that day, so I could walk back. But when I saw tourist information in the Mill Bay Plaza, inspiration struck. Might there be a bus to take me back? If so, I could go the full 20 kilometers. The person behind the counter handed me a bus schedule. It looked like it might work if I kept track of the time and changed buses at the plaza. Delighted, I kept going. Mill Bay Road crossed the highway to become Shawnigan Lake Road. As I walked past the top of Shawnigan Lake, a deer stood frozen among the trees, its antlers quivering slightly. The road was quiet, with few cars, but I happily noted the bus stops and kept checking my watch. Just under 15 kilometers that day, but time was up if I wanted to make my connection. As I waited at the bus stop, I rechecked the schedule and almost dropped it in my alarm. How could I have misread it? That time was for a bus traveling the other way. There were no buses that could take me back to the Mill Bay Plaza before the last bus to the ferry left. Now what? I certainly couldn't hike the whole 15 kilometers back. There was only one thing to do. I anxiously waited on the lonely road for a car to come by. When one finally did, I stuck out my thumb, and the young woman stopped. Yes, she could take me to the plaza in plenty of time to catch the bus to my car. In fact, I had a 30-minute wait for that bus. Hitchhiking had been so easy. Might as well give it a try while I waited. A fairly steady stream of cars left the plaza, and it was only the 6th or 7th that helped me out. An elderly couple insisted on driving me right to my car. Now I had a new plan. Perhaps I could hike straight through after all, at least on the days where I ended near a road. Over the course of 14 days, I walked from mile 0 in Victoria to Departure Bay Ferry Terminal in Nanaimo by way of Lake Cowichan, over 220 kilometers, most of it in sight of the ocean. I encountered a black bear lazily sauntering along the trail just south of Duncan, and totally unconcerned by my fevered clapping and singing. A huge owl perched on a park sign, pretending to be part of it, until he grew annoyed with my picture-taking and flew off on giant wings. I stepped across the abyss, a huge crack from a forgotten earthquake. I crossed breathtaking canyons on suspension bridges and restored train trestles. I stepped and jumped, my heart pounding, from stone to stone across the turbulent Coxsila River. I marveled at the giant murals of Chemainus and delighted to make my way right through the city of Nanaimo, from green space to park to nature preserve to shoreline trail. I learned a lot that summer, that back roads are friendly places, that wildlife teems just beyond our cities and towns, that I've reached the perfect age for hitchhiking, that cars give a distorted perception of distance. People driving me back were always amazed, even dumbfounded or disbelieving that I had walked that distance in one afternoon. Even to me, it would seem impossibly far. Yet it was actually quite easy to cover long distances with a few hours walking, seeing and experiencing my surroundings in a much more intimate way than driving or even biking. It had been more fun than I had ever envisioned, and I knew that I'd soon be planning to take up the trail again across the strait.